We're interviewing today Philomena Baker, who comes from Odessa, I think it's in Russia. Then went to Germany, met John Baker from Fort Kent and married him and came here. Established Baker Studios and did photography in Fort Kent for 10 years, then moved to Bangor. She'll be here. This is a book about her life. That's her right there with her mother as they escaped from Russia and Germany. Her maiden name was Keller. Kathy Olmsted wrote the book with Filomena. And they're coming here today on June 26, 2013 for a book signing. So I'll be talking to Filomena in a few minutes. One chapter in Filomena's book deals with Fort Kent. And she had the Baker Studio, portraits and weddings, photo finishing and photography. And this is her building on Main Street. She was here at least 10 years. I think they lived upstairs of that building. Today this building is the Fort Kent Chamber of Commerce building. Now Filomena is coming here at 10 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock now. Then we're going to have a luncheon at the Swamp Buck. And then a book signing from 3 to 5. In the meantime, I hope to have enough time to have her tell her story on film. So this is Philomena Baker's studio, and I think they lived upstairs. I'm not sure. We're going to find out. Now it's the Chamber of Commerce building in Fort Kent. Right on Main Street. Here it is from across the street. Baker Studio. Still here. It's been through many floods. Okay, we're
never
here
done
with
that before, so you better be patient with me. And you'll have to cut out quite a few pieces.
Well, I won't think so. I don't think so.
Well,
usually we don't.
really?
You know?
Well, that's,
So we're here with Philomena Baker, who's from Herman or Hamden or Bangor?
Bangor.
Bangor. Reason Philomena is here is because she's launching a book today in Fort Kent, which is the 26th of June 2013, about her life and where she started from. Now, why I read your book. Odessa is part of Russia?
It is in Russia, yeah. It's by the Black Sea.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a big city.
Oh, Odessa is a city.
It's a city,
Okay.
Odessa. It's a big, large city.
And
Capital
what
city.
part of Russia is it in? Is it in the? It's not in Ukraine or anything like that. It's.
I really don't. I think it is a Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is that.
So actually, you
And
were born
It's
Russian.
My father was Russian.
Okay.
Yeah, and my mother was German. She came from the German colony of German people who have had come from Alsace-Lorraine, actually.
Okay.
The German people from Alsace-Lorraine came to Russia, to Odessa, actually. It might have been maybe 40 miles away from Odessa, but that's where they're settled.
Yeah.
And that's where my mother was born.
Now, what was her maiden name?
Keller.
Keller.
Yeah, Keller. Yeah.
Now I noticed you took that name rather than your father's name. Is that it? Or what happened there?
Well, yeah, Semenyenko. I was a Semenyenko at once, but then we had to cover up, and I think Catherine can explain that really well.
Yeah.
That we had to be careful
Yeah.
as to what name we're using at that point. Yeah. So my mother kept her name Keller rather than the name Semenyenko,
Oh.
because the Germans would have.
Yeah. The Germans had
met us.
occupied the...
They would have, yeah, they would have sent us back or to Russia, or I mean to wherever, or put us somewhere that we didn't want to be. Who knows what it would have been? But we, in order to remain German, we had to drop my father's name.
Yeah.
And then people lost their IDs, and we didn't have anything, so they accepted what we told them at that time, and that may have saved our life.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
Now, what year were you born?
1934.
34. So
Yeah.
that means you're going to be 79 or something pretty
Just
soon.
about,
Yeah.
I'm not counting it. People have to tell me.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Okay, so now when you were born in Russia,
In Odessa.
Odessa, and you're raised there, and
Yeah.
Okay, so all of a sudden it's World War II there,
Yeah.
and the Nazis are there in Russia.
Oh, yeah. Well, they were there. They were there all this time,
Yeah.
and then the Russian, came in.
Yeah. So what happens to your father there?
My father had malaria. He was sick. He was malaria. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a severe
Yeah.
illness. And in fact, he had malaria when I was conceived,
Oh.
and they had to deal with he was told, and my mother were told, that if that child was to be born, there may have been complication with that person, with the child. And they suggested an abortion.
That was you.
That was me. At that time, nobody knew who it was, but
Yeah.
and so my mother refused that, and she maintained that she would let God decide that, and so here I was.
Well, isn't that something?
Yeah,
How close you came not to be here
that's right. That's right.
because of your mother's decision.
Yeah, she was a firm believer. She wasn't a church runner, but she was a firm believer
In God.
in God's guidance.
Now, your father, did he last long?
He used to have attacks. Malaria is,
An infection.
and it's quite severe, because they had attacks and so forth. But I really don't know that much about it. It's just a few things that my mother shared with me, but she wasn't the person to dwell on things. So I kind of maintained, I knew about it, but I didn't.
Did you know
think
him?
it was. I didn't bother. I can remember him. Yeah.
You can?
Yeah, I can remember him, but I can't quite tell how old I was when I last saw him, but I must have been maybe 5, 6,
Yeah.
something like that. And the pictures are still
Yeah.
there, you know. And you can see in some of them how sick he was. And, but, you know, so.
What was he doing over there? What kind of job did he have?
I really don't know at that point. I knew that he had a big truck.
Oh, yeah?
And we have a picture of that truck. And whatever he did with the truck, you know.
Yeah.
But when he purchased that truck, he was in a village. He lived in a village, and they lived there. And don't ask me for the name because I really wouldn't know. It was a Russian name of the place where he lived. And but the picture is there, and my mother always was happy to remember how happy he was when he bought that truck, a brand new truck, and it was the very first truck in that village.
Oh, yeah.
And the children liked him, you know, and so my friends and so forth. So when he got that truck, he loaded it up with all the kids in that village, and they were driving around.
It was a big thing.
Yes, it was a big thing.
Now, did you have brothers and sisters?
Never, no.
And so now you're in Odessa.
Yeah.
And your mother decides to what? The war is raging around you there.
Yeah.
You decide to what? To move west?
Well, my father was called into the war.
In the army?
Into, the army. And then my mother was in Odessa at that time. She moved away from the village that they lived there, but so what would you like to know?
Well, your father's gone.
He was called into the army.
When did your mother decide we have to go, we have to leave?
About the German. Well, first of all, she moved to Odessa from that village, wherever they were. And she lived in, there was in the city, or a little bit outside, close to outside of the city, there was an established, it was like a park, let's put it that way. It was like a park, and people lived in that in that area. So it was called the German, later on it was called the German Park or whatever. But that's where my mother settled in, because my father was in the service.
Yeah.
And they called in, and everyone, whether they were sick or not or whatever, all the men were called in.
Yeah, he had malaria, and they still took him.
They still took them, yeah. So, but then my mother moved to that.
Did you have an apartment there, or you lived in the park?
Yeah, I have a picture with the kids there, with us standing around, 5 of us, and playing, and so and it was made for the German people from the village that moved there, and so that was when the Russians still occupied Odessa.
Now, when did she decide to leave? You went through Germany, right?
Yeah. Well, we're not that far yet.
Okay.
So, when the Germans occupied Odessa, then my mother was fortunate because she could talk the language perfectly, as she did the Russian language. They never would have thought that she was anything else but Russian. She was perfect in that language, and so was I, because that's all I knew.
Russian?
Yeah, at the beginning. And so what was the question?
In the park there?
The park.
How did you live there?
Well, we lived, it was inside, it was like occupied, the buildings were around, and I could show it to you on some pictures that we have, but it was occupied by apartments.
Yeah.
You know, and inside it was kind of inside in the middle of the apartments. The children were out there playing all the that was protecting us because there were no cars or anything there.
Yeah.
So it was a big park.
Yeah.
A big establishment with.
How did she live? She had. Okay. Did she have a job?
Oh, she always had a job. She could
Doing
have a
what?
job in the Russian language, and she could have a job in the German language. And of course, when the German came in, she was asked for. She could have picked any kind of job that she wanted, and so she did. And so we then moved into, let's say first, the Germans moved into an establishment close to the Black Sea.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, Odessa is, the Black Sea.
You're right on.
Right there, right on the edge. Anyway, but the Germans, the army occupied that area, and they established their communications there, and they needed interpreters.
Okay.
So there, my mother was very asked for.
So she
spoke perfect Russian and perfect German.
So you never suffered there?
No, never. We moved in, and I was there. We had a nice apartment, and it was right. And my mother was where I was, or I was where my mother was.
Yeah.
And so, as children, there I said the German word, Kinder. as children, there were other kids around, and we were always playing, and so she was working right there. So,
then the Russians came in. They pushed the Germans away.
At that time, yeah. At that time, then we had to flee. And because she worked for the German army,
yeah,
she too had to flee.
Right.
Not only had to, but also wanted to. And so, because otherwise that would have been the end of her and me, probably.
Well, I think
would have come in.
The Russians were just as bad as the Nazis as far as being cruel, and they would have killed you all.
That's right, yeah, because we were with the Germans at that time, and so. But actually, we were fortunate because my mother came from a village, maybe 40 kilometers away. That's where she was born.
Okay.
And that was close to Odessa, and so that's where we were then, my mother and I.
So how did you get out of Odessa then? Did you walk?
No, that's said in the in the
The book?
book. The book, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, what what happened is that
You had to get out.
yeah, we had to get out.
Get on a train or what?
And we did, yeah.
Get on a train?
On the train, yeah. And the train was filled with German soldiers that were wounded.
Okay.
And so the Germans army, to help us to get out of Germany, they have brought in 2 cars of trains, and that's where we were able to go to
Get on.
to travel. That's how we. The thing is that it had to happen immediately. So we had maybe 4 or 5 hours time to get out of that park building and get by streetcars to that area where the Germans had their establishment, and from where they would have caught the
Put you on
the
a train.
train to leave.
Yeah.
And so now it's, you have to pardon my
So
kind
now
of
you're on
stuttering here because I'm trying to still visualize what happened when. And so we went, I'll be right with you to remember what you wanted to say. So it was an emergency alarm that people who want to leave and get away from the Russians because they were coming back in had to immediately leave or never leave it at all. So they established. Can I have a little water, maybe?
Hold it.
I have to. Yeah.
Hold it.
Yeah.
Just put it on the floor there. I bet you don't talk that much
At one time, you're right. Yeah.
So now you're on the train.
Yeah, not yet. See, first my mother found out that if we wanted to leave, we have to leave now or never, or we won't make it, because they're occupied Odessa by then. So, and we lived in the German house that was, that where the Germans lived, and so. But anyway.
You had to get on a streetcar?
Yeah. Okay. It's just too much at one time at this point. Just a minute. Yeah. It was time. There was a certain period of time of whatever hours that they had to either leave or stay there and then be occupied by the Russians again.
Yeah.
And that was how close that the Russians were to occupy Odessa again. So shut it off for a little bit. Yeah. So where my mother worked, they told the Germans where my mother worked, the soldiers, there, told they were in. say that, but it's the talking that.
It's you're getting on the train with wounded soldiers, and you're traveling how far to get to where you want to go there?
Yeah, we only had a few hours to go and get some stuff, to wear and so forth, and to come back by streetcar to the train that was waiting for us in the woods. And so we did that, and then took off, But there were 2 cars that the German army provided for us. And it was only, there were some Russian people that wanted to leave also, but they weren't allowed to.
So you were lucky there.
Yeah, so we were very lucky.
And anybody attack you while you're leaving and by train, the planes, Russian planes, or anybody?
Not really.
That was not
No, we were just driving, and and the 2 cars were attached to a train. And but there was, no food or so forth, but it was.
You remember the year, the date?
No.
No.
That was when at the time when German was reoccupied by
Probably
the Russians.
Probably 1944.
That's about it. Yeah, that's about it.
Now, where did you go? What's the name of the town where you landed with the train there? You're in Germany then.
Yeah, we were in Posen, in Poland.
Oh, okay.
We got out of Germany into Poland, and there they stopped the train, and we were able to get out. And I remember seeing this big buildings, that were there, and they were showing us to come out of the train and get into this big building, and that's where we became German citizens.
Oh, okay.
They gave us our IDs and everything.
Is that right?
From now on, we're German citizens.
Now, you were 9 years old.
Yeah, just that's what
Now, Poland was still occupied by the Germans then, at that point.
Poland was, yeah. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So did you get to Germany after that? When you left Poland, or did you stay there?
That was reoccupied by the Germans then.
Yeah.
So that became Germany.
Yeah.
And we lived there, and
Oh, you lived right there.
we lived there, yeah. And
Not for long. Didn't the Russians come in there too? After a while?
now we had, just a minute, we have to, we skipped something because I could have written it down better than this. Than writing.
Well, that's all right.
Things,
You were just 9 years old
no,
anyway.
let me just concentrate as to where we were. Oh yeah. So when the Germans were coming in, or the Russians again. Okay, the Russians were coming in. We were told that there were two cars.
You went through Hungary?
Yeah.
Hungary?
Yeah. You can start again. Okay. We went. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we went through Hungary, and the word got. And I'm not sure if it was the same day or if it might have been the next day that we went through Hungary. But the people got the word that we were evacuating from Odessa, and so help me God, they found out that there was no food or anything there, and that we're coming through. They stood by the rails of the train that came by. and they had bread, big pieces of bread, maybe half loaves or maybe loaves of bread in their
Apron.
aprons there, yeah. And they had, well, I don't know, they found out when the train left, and so, and they went and they got all this bread and stood by the
Tracks,
rails
yeah.
that the train passed by, didn't even stop, we just went right through. And they were throwing, they had their clothes and the aprons and whatever.
Trying to help you, huh?
Yeah, and they were throwing that bread, and I remember how the men that were in that cart were catching the bread, and they wouldn't let the women go and do that, but because they didn't want to lose anybody,
Yeah.
But so they were gentlemen, and they were catching the loaves of bread that these people from Hungary had prepared for us, brought to us. And so we did have something to eat, as we were going, because we didn't know the destination. We just knew that we were going to Germany, because we're German people. And we were...
Now, once you've got your citizenship, your ID, your mother and you.
That's right, yeah. That was in Poland.
That was in Poland.
Already.
When did you get to Germany and go to school? And you're only 9 years old, so you must have gone to school.
That was, yeah, we did. But that was a ways further.
Yeah.
Because there were no schools were open as schools. They were all occupied by people who fled.
Okay.
And they were sleeping on the floor. It was just like a place to,
Yeah. Survive.
To survive, and then they were free to either stay there or continue to go wherever they wanted.
Do you remember when the war ended? Was it a big celebration? The Germans must have felt vanquished or something. The whole country was destroyed.
Yeah, yeah.
Where were you at that time?
I think we were in Poland.
Oh, you were?
When the war ended, we were in Poland. And because and my mother had a position as a telephone operator.
Okay.
And what the Germans did then is to give her a house alongside the highway. I mean, there were houses alongside the highway, and one of them was given to us. And they set up a telephone connection, because then they were still connecting the calls. You couldn't just directly call somebody. You had to go through a telephone.
You needed an operator.
An operator, yeah. And my mother, because of the language, Russian and German, and she could understand everything, and they, in Poland, just by the edge of Germany, so it was almost Germany, but there was a little house alongside the road. It was like a highway road, Anyway, but main road in a village that passed through the village, and so we had they provided us with a little house, and they established the telephone connection there, to build in this big whatever, and that was to connect any calls that came through, also from soldiers from German, when they talked to each other about what to do next with,
Yeah.
and where to go.
Now, when did you go
So-
back to school there? What were you doing during this time?
Well, for a while there was no school,
Okay.
and then they opened up, and they put the students in the classes that they needed to be according to their age.
Yeah.
And so, but that was like a few kilometers away, couple or 3 kilometers. I'm not quite sure at that time. You know.
Now, at that point, you just spoke Russian.
Yeah.
When did you learn German?
Well, while I was playing with the kids there,
Oh, okay.
and somehow I learned it right
Well,
away.
that's the best
and my mother
way.
too. But now we're still in that area, in that house, right alongside the road that where we were connecting the soldiers and the armies. How should I say that? It's secret
Communication.
communications, right? Yeah,
So now you learn German with your friends,
yeah,
and you go to German school.
yeah.
And so when did you graduate from what we call high school here?
Well,
must have been
that was-
18?
Yeah,
And you started,
I was my regular age because they were putting us into where
Yeah.
age
so
was.
eventually you graduated.
Yeah.
When did you get interested in photography? Were you,
I don't know how that went. Let's see.
did you work for the government or something?
No.
Now the Americans
I
are
was,
there.
no,
They-
because because we fled again when
the Russians
when
came.
the Russians came.
Yeah, you had to go.
Yeah, so and there we there was train. There was train established. They brought a train and established it for us, for the German people, and so and one time all of a sudden the word came out and we were told that we have either leave or
Yeah.
the Russians are going to be here. And
So in what
do
town
those
in
one-
Germany did you end up?
So and I think it was Nuremberg.
Nuremberg?
Nuremberg.
That's where you went to school?
No, that's where we came to.
Okay.
But then we somehow wound up in Bayreuth, Richard Wagner's Festival House, Bayreuth, in Bavaria,
Okay.
and that's where I went to college, and we lived in also emergency homes that Hitler had built when he started the war. Because somehow he envisioned, he knew that German people will have to come out of Poland and Russia. And he had built at the end of the city of Bayreuth, Richard Wagner's Festival House, that was very well known. He, at the edge of the city of Bayreuth, he had built up all kinds of houses that, like we see them here in Germany, they built houses only with stones and only with bricks and everything else. But he, in his vision there, I mean, that this did that, he provided for the refugees. He knew, he figured that when the German people had to come out of Russia, they would have to stay somewhere. And so he built up homes like we have here, and but there it was something new, and it was meant for the refugees that would come
And you
out.
stayed there.
And we stayed there. We lived there. And I remember I was going, when I was going to school, I was, we lived there, and I even started to, well, anyway, that's leave it
Now, how
there.
did you meet John Baker?
Oh, yeah, let me switch now. That was,
He was there after the war, huh?
yeah, that was quite a bit later, that's what I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. They were looking for, wait a minute, I just had it.
Now, John Baker is from Fort Kent, and he was in the army in Germany, occupied Germany,
Yeah,
right?
and I was, yeah,
And you were working for who?
I was working for the American, I was on base. They had, of course, there were places where where they attend the people, the families of the soldiers that were the American soldiers, where they lived and where they had established the special services clubs, and that was for the soldiers, for the men that were there, and and had time out, and they needed to do something. So instead, in order that they wouldn't be running around with who know who, the special service clubs were established there, and they had craft shops there, and they had photography, a special area, and so that their dependents. Meanwhile, there were some dependents coming to meet with the families that they had, and so forth, and they lived there, and that was all established. They had this, like I said, photography place there, photo lab there, and then, like I said,
that's where you were?
Yeah, that's where I worked, and there was the craft shops were there, and that was all established for the men that were there, so that they wouldn't have to run around the city and there. And I was the.
Do you remember the year?
I don't remember the years.
No.
I really don't.
It's after the war.
That was after the war. Yeah.
So John Baker from Fort Kent is in Germany. What's the name of the town again?
Bayreuth.
And he's processing film.
Well, he had some film, and I was this photo instructor there.
Oh, okay.
So that's where they came. The attendants, especially the families, but more for the men in the service. They had the lab established.
Did you go out with him a long time?
Not really.
No.
Well, maybe I knew him a year or something, and then he was going home, and that's where.
Did you get married there or over here?
I was just trying to remember that when I got married. Yeah, I got married there. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to be married to come over.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So
now you land in Fort Kent. Strange place.
Yeah.
They speak French.
That's right.
Now, by that time, you spoke English. You had Russian, German, and English.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When I was working for the Special Service Club in Germany.
Yeah.
I spoke English. I had English in college, and and I spoke very well already, and then I
You had three languages.
spoke even more English than I.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So now you come to Fort Kent and you decide that you're going to start a business? Baker studio?
Let me recall. Yeah.
You were a photographer for weddings and stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I was. I learned the process of dealing with cameras and develop film and do all of that, and that was the Special Services Club's photo shop, and that was open for not only the men in the service, but for their families, and and.
So you already had that
So
skill when you came here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 So I was a special services photo instructor, and yeah, and
Now this building, I just went to film your building where you live. Baker Studio.
Yeah.
You lived upstairs?
No.
No, you didn't live there. Just your
What?
studio was there.
Yeah. Now wait a minute. I always had my studio when in where I lived. I never really had to go to work
Yeah.
to another place.
Did you live upstairs or back?
At which time are you talking?
Baker Studio on Main Street here.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When we came here, we stayed with Irene, with his family on Pleasant Street, and then there was an opening on Main Street where I then established my photo lab and a studio, and we lived right in back of the studio.
Oh, okay.
Because it was a long building towards the river.
Yeah.
So I had my apartment there. We lived there, and that's where the children were born.
Which one is the oldest child?
Debbie.
Debbie?
Yeah.
And then you had Grace?
Grace.
You had
yeah.
two daughters?
Yeah.
Are they close together?
They're
or?
very close together.
I mean, in age?
Yeah, they're, let's see. You know, yeah, they're about a year and a half apart.
Yeah. So you had a successful business here in Fort Kent.
Yes, yeah.
I noticed a lot of pictures with Baker Studio on it. Graduations?
Everything.
Weddings?
Yes. Yeah.
What kind of contracts did you have when you were a photography studio here? You did weddings, graduations? How about just personal photographs and stuff?
Oh yeah, portraits. Yes.
Portraits.
Yeah, yeah. Yesterday, when we were, Catherine and I were there for the people to ask me questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, we.
Where were you yesterday? Prescott? Caribou?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. So anyway.
So how long did you
the first
last
time
here
that
in
I
the...
really reached back so far again.
Yeah, your business here in Fort Kent was
Yeah.
about 10 years?
Yeah, I lived in Fort Kent 10 years, and then
Yeah.
that's where I had my two girls, my two daughters. And then I went to Bangor.
Bangor. You divorced John
Yeah.
before you went? Now you're going to Bangor.
Yes.
What connection do you have in Bangor? It's quite a move from here to there. You have two daughters.
Mhm. At that time?
Did you get hired in Bangor?
Yes, Steven Studios.
Oh, okay.
I started working for Steven Studios. And there again, pretty well. Mostly portraits and traveling, and schools and so forth for Stevens at that time. And then Stevens moved out and I established myself again.
Did you buy his business or you got your own?
Yeah, because I came to Fort.
No,
I came here.
In Bangor there, did you buy Stevens' business or you just established your own?
No, I established my own. I was already established.
Yeah.
So and I continued that. Yeah.
Now you met up with a chiropractor there by the name of Moshe Meyerowitz.
That's right. Yeah.
Was that soon after you moved or?
Well, maybe, I don't know, a year or two. I'm really not quite sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And you married him.
Yeah.
And he was a champion race walker.
We both were. He had. I was race walking first, and he.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and he. Well, we were interested in race walking together at that time. We were already married, I think.
And you. Now he became a world champion, didn't he?
We both were.
Both. That's what I thought.
In fact, I got more. How should I say? I got more recognition than he had really, and he didn't like that too much. But that's okay. He couldn't help.
But you went all over the world.
Yes, we did.
Race walking.
Yeah, race walking. He was I started race walking first, and he was actually training me, and we were already married.
Yeah.
We were already. And then he started to,
compete.
Train himself also, and we both were competing. So
where do you compete in race walking? Is there a race in Maine? Do you have to go elsewhere? Or where do you go?
No, we trained ourselves actually.
Yeah.
And then there were different places that we traveled to compete.
Yeah.
In different towns and
were there
places.
Some in Maine?
I could ask him. He would probably know. I think so. On a smaller level.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
So I remember him one year. He was in Australia.
We were together. Both. We were together. Yeah. We were already married. When we started that.
Yeah.
So and we traveled.
Did you become both champions in Australia?
Yeah. Well, it depends. We both did well.
Yeah.
Did very well.
So you traveled all over the world.
Yes, we did. Yeah. Yeah. Instead of taking vacations, we kind of trained and traveled.
Yeah, well, that's a lot
and we
of
had fun. It was a good thing to do.
Absolutely. Now, race walking, you cannot jog, you cannot run.
Oh yeah, and it's special. Yeah, there's a special way of put your foot on the ground every time you move.
You can't run.
Yeah, no, yeah.
How do you get disqualified? Is it tempting to run sometimes?
Oh yeah. You're not allowed to. You have to start with your heel first.
Or your heel.
Place your heel first, and then kind of how should I say that? And then, like what would you call it in English? You start with your heel, with your knees straight, and then you go. You.
Okay, you go on the.
Yeah, you can't run. You can't take your feet off the ground. So
okay.
you're kind of slide, you know,
Yeah.
over, go, not slide, but you
Yeah.
know.
Your foot is,
Foot is always on the ground, but you plant your foot with your heel, and then you, uh, now,
move forward, yeah.
yeah.
Is it hard on you? Is it hard on your hips? Do you
Oh,
have,
no, no,
No?
no, no, no. It's very natural. It's very healthy to do that type of training and work. And so we both, thank God we weren't in the same category, you know.
Yeah.
But we both were in different categories, so it was okay when one of us wins and the other one doesn't, or whatever.
each took your turn?
Yeah, well, we did very well, and we had fun with that.
Yeah. How long did you do that? How many years? You haven't done it in a while, I
Oh,
imagine.
no, yeah, no. We've done it for a few years,
Yeah.
yeah.
Keeps you in
Yeah.
shape.
It did, yeah, it did. So, you know, it was quite a few, maybe 8 years, maybe.
8 years, yeah.
So, in that vicinity.
Now, because probably of motion influence, both your daughters became chiropractors too.
That's right.
Debbie,
Yeah,
she's in
she's in Bangor. In
Bangor?
Hamden.
Hamden. And Grace is she still in the state of Maine?
She is in no, she's always been in Boston.
Boston.
Yeah, she practices in Boston. Yeah, and she's married there, and so, yeah.
You have grandchildren.
Yes, 2 grandsons. Yeah, Nathan and Mark.
Now, how long did you have your business in Bangor? You were there about 1970, I would think, huh?
Probably, yeah.
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 And you had quite a business. You had a very successful business in Bangor.
Yes. Very, very, very good. I was contracting, first of I did everything in photography, portraiture. That was done at my studio. And then I had many contracts of high school contracts and college contracts in the state, outside the state.
Oh, outside the state too?
Oh yes, I traveled a lot to different cities.
Did somebody go out and find business for you?
No. They came to me and asked to contract.
Your reputation was good then?
Yes, absolutely, yes, yeah.
Did you do Fort Kent High School while you were here?
I am not sure, I don't think so.
No?
I did before I left Fort Kent, you know, but then after that I didn't come back to.
While you were here, you did Fort Kent High School.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's been a successful year, huh?
Yes.
I mean, life.
Life, very, very, very.
It's amazing, you know, coming out of Odessa
Yes.
and everything that happened.
Yeah.
You ended up here
Yes.
and had a very successful life, and now you're 79 years old. Still doing good.
Yes. Yeah.
Now you live in where do you live? In Bangor or Hampton?
Bangor.
Bangor, yeah.
Yeah, on Broadway.
Now you, we're launching your book here in Fort Kent today. There,
Well.
we're going to meet in about a half an hour.
Uh-huh.
What got you to write this book? How did you start writing that book, or did anybody ask you to write it, or how did you met Catherine Olmsted?
Yeah, well, I actually wanted to write a book, but I just never had the time to dedicate myself to that. And thanks God, Catherine came along, and we, you know, really were well together, worked well together.
Okay.
Whatever that means, you know. And so she was a good support group for me. And yeah, and it's.
Now, you were in the Bangor Daily News 2 years ago. She had a serial there every week. We'd learn about your story.
Yes, that's right too. Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
And then you decided to make a book out of it.
Yeah.
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 Well,
See, you know that better than I do. You reminded me of it, but I'm glad you do, because I don't think of these things that much, you know. But after it's over, you know.
Yeah.
But it's true. It was a wonderful, you know, experience all along. I like sports and so forth, and so that.
you're going to meet a lot of your old friends there in half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have
I look
lunch
forward.
with.
Yeah, I very much look forward to it.
So-
Fort Kent people just stayed in my heart.
Yeah.
They're my first contact, you know, and I just felt like everyone is my relative. You know?
Everyone's your friend in Fort Kent.
Friends, yeah.
So you enjoyed your 10 years in Fort Kent.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. That was a wonderful time. No one could be happier than I was when I was here.
Is that right?
Everybody, yeah. It was a family,
Yeah.
and it was just so moving and so comfortable, you know, to me.
Yeah, you were coming in from Germany into a strange town.
Yeah,
Most of the people spoke French.
that's right.
You didn't speak French.
No.
No. But you still
I guess
felt,
that's about the only language that I didn't speak.
but still you felt welcome here.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. John's grandmother and mother, and they took me in his mother said when I came, "You're my daughter, and you'll always be my daughter."
Is that
And
right?
She was always my mother. My mother passed away and had gone, and she treated me just like that.
Now, when you moved to Fort Kent from Germany, was your mother still alive?
Yes, yeah.
Did you ever see her again?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I flew over a couple times, but
Okay.
yeah, and she's very independent. That she did very well.
Yeah?
But you know, being a mother myself now, I cannot even imagine how she felt to see her daughter, only child,
Yeah.
crossing
Crossing the big pond.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's quite a story. Now, the other story here also is that when she left Odessa and traveled here and there and always had to leave because the Russians were coming in,
Yeah.
she kept a lot of photographs from way back
My mother, yes, yeah.
of her parents and
Mm-hmm.
the life she had over there. And that's part of your book. Real old photographs of the way she lived and her.
Yes, yeah.
It's quite a thing that she kept that. She saved that.
Yeah, that was her treasure.
Yeah.
And in her wisdom, she did what she did, and every time when we left, she would give it to somebody to keep them safe.
Oh, okay.
When we traveled, then we brought them with us ourselves, traveling, meaning in a train and so forth, because the first time we left Russia, we took the train.
Yeah.
But this aside, that was her. She treasured the photographs, and at that time when she had photographs done of myself, of families and so forth, and collected them, and that was not that common that people would, you know, go and be photographed, except for pictures,
Yeah.
IDs and so forth. And she just had photographs done of me as I grew up, and saved her parents and my great-great-parents and so on. So she was very much aware and very much concerned that I would know who my relatives were.
Now, how did you acquire those photographs?
Well, they were my mother's. She had them until she passed away, and
That's when you got them.
I got them. Yeah.
Well, that's very lucky, huh?
Yes. Yes. I often wonder what I'd do without them.
Yeah, because that...
Having a family myself.
Yeah. Well, listen, Filomena, we are going to have lunch right now at the Swamp Buck. You're going to meet some friends from way back, 40 years ago.
Yes.
And they're all looking forward to seeing you again.
I am grateful for that.
And so we want to wish you a lot of luck and keep on doing good stuff.
Yes, yes.
You've had an interesting life.
No, thank you. I hope I continue to have an interest.
Yeah, well, you know, you're still
Yeah,
very
that's
young, huh?
true.
79 is not old anymore.
No. Only it's how you feel. That's what.
That's
takes
what
you.
it is, yeah.
That's the age.
Well, thank you for
thank
coming
you.
in, okay?
Thank you. Thank
All
you for
right.
your patience, and thank you for helping me out when I.
Now we get along
I
pretty
was
good.
short of my words.
We get along pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, her sister and her sister's 5 children and another older aunt. Because she was able to speak those languages, she got this job with the German army that enabled her to become part of the evacuation that went with the German soldiers. So Filomena, and if you've read the story, you know this, but that they added 2 boxcars to a train of wounded German soldiers as the Russians were reclaiming Odessa, and the Germans were facing defeat. So if they had not gotten out, they probably wouldn't have survived. So she spent a little time on a boxcar, in a boxcar, and also, can you describe that last vision of Odessa when you stopped?
Well,
and looked back?
What do you want me to say?
Well, when you said you almost didn't make the train, right?
Yeah.
When you were,
My mother.
yeah, because you were the last people to get on the train, and you stopped to look back at the sunset.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I stopped because I needed to go into the museum. They didn't have a bathroom on the train. And all of a sudden the train started. You know, everybody's calling me to get there. And so finally, they pulled me up.
That is that was a long journey, and there was no facilities for the passengers in the boxcars as there was
So
for
they
the
stopped every
soldiers.
so often.
Yeah, and they stopped every so often. So then, Filomena, having spoken Russian for her first 9 years of life, suddenly her mother started speaking German to her. She didn't understand why, but we all know now, in retrospect, when Filomena got to Germany, it wasn't that hard, right, to talk German. All of a sudden, she not only had a new name, she was no longer Filomena Semenienko, she was Filomena Keller, her mother's maiden name. So her mother had taken back her maiden name. She couldn't have kept her Russian name, right, in the German, with the German occupation. So she had a new identity, and so did her daughter. If you are anything like me, you were probably wondering what was going on outside of Filomena's protected world. And I actually did a lot of reading to find out what was happening in Odessa while the Germans were occupying it before the Russians took over and were successful in reclaiming that land. In fact, Odessa was one of the last two areas that was a stronghold for the Germans, and Filomena and her family got out just in time. But so, I mean, we all know what the Germans did to the Jews, and that story just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I just decided that isn't part of Filomena's story. So we actually had a chapter in which I tried to create a little snapshot of what it was like outside of her protected, happy world, but it abandoned it eventually and decided that it wasn't part of her story. We wouldn't put it in her book. But I left the resources in the bibliography at the end. So if you are interested, I would encourage you to look for those, because that's the history book story. That's what history is. And if you should take the time to read about what was happening politically, militarily, it will heighten your appreciation of what Filomena's mother was able to do. Because if you realize this, if you read Filomena's story, you'll think that everything was happy and that her mother made everything seem like it was just something that we're doing for fun. When she was walking with her, she was doing little math and drawing pictures in the sand. And as a teacher, Filomena's mother was able to keep her daughter engaged in the process and not aware of all of the things that were going on. So if you should take the time to read that history, you will realize how successful and how amazing her mother's achievement was.
I'd like to add something. It wasn't so much that nothing happened and we just walked. She did explain to me what's going on. And so I was well aware of what we're doing. And while we were walking, and then unfortunately that we could walk away because some got caught in the process that wanted to do the same thing and didn't succeed. So she explained it to me, but there was no fear in her. She was just telling me what we're doing, and that's what we were doing. We were getting away from the Russians. So
this is what you do when you're a German. You get away from the Russians.
At that time, it was very important.
Yes,
and so I knew how serious it was, but I had no fear because my mother didn't make me scared. She just says, so this is what we're doing, and we're going to see her sister with her children, so as to say my aunt and my cousins. So that's what that's who they were. So whatever. But she didn't keep things away from me. She was explaining them, and but without any fear. She was explaining them as a fact, and how fortunate we are that we were able to do that. Because a lot of people couldn't make it out, and they stayed with the Russians and so forth.
One of my sister's favorite lines in this story, when she read it for the first time, she read it. She said, "I just love that part where Filomena says, if there's one thing she learned from this experience is that children are like their parents, that they model themselves on what their parents do, so that even today," she said, "I seldom panic because she was modeling her mother." And I guess we can say that may have been passed on to the next generation. I want to recognize it. I think you've all seen Debbie and Nathan and Mark, but it's just wonderful. And I don't know if you all know that they surprised their mother by arriving here today. And we're really delighted. I don't know how did the decision get made that you were actually going to come? Because there was a point at which there was too much work to be done and 10-day vacation coming up and we're not going to be able to make it.
I think Nate was the
I think Grandma asked us if we were coming, and Mom was like, busy day in the office, and I looked at her immediately, and I was like, we're going. That's what
Is there anything, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but for me it's been a great experience to get to know you guys better and to see how engaged you are in your genealogy and your family history, and I just, if you have any comments to make about how that has affected you and what you might think about doing as a result?
Absolutely. First of all, I just think the book itself is phenomenal because you can read history books all day. Until you read this, it's just like taking one family and seeing exactly what they went through and what they did during the war. And you can't find that in a regular history book. And the history that is in that book is phenomenal.
Thank you.
Unlike any other. But yeah, as far as some genealogy, finding some other family members in Germany, we had discussed, and what did we discuss there?
About finding grandma's dad, because we never really figured out what happened with him. So just a project maybe for me and my brother, just maybe to find out one day what happened.
In the book, it kind of details that a little bit.
That there are a lot of unanswered questions.
A lot of unanswered
unanswered. Did you get the website I forwarded to you?
I did.
Andreas? This is a part of this experience that isn't in the book. Late in the process, the publisher said we have to have permission from any living relatives to use their photos and their family photos. So she has 3 living cousins in Germany, Victoria, Alfred, and Johannes. And none of them speaks English. And so Johannes agreed through his son to be the spokesman for the 3 cousins to give permission. But I had to write, it ended up to be actually a written letter, but I started out with an email. Well, actually, I started out with a phone conversation. Filomena gave me the phone number of Johannes's, what's in her name? It begins with M, Margaret. It's Margaret in German, but whatever that is, Johannes's wife. So she spoke some English, right? You had talked with her, and then, so I called her and she spoke some English, but she said, "Oh, let me give you to my son." And so I spoke with him, and he speaks very well, and was excited to talk to somebody in the United States. And Johannes is a restorer of cathedrals in Germany. That was what he did as an adult. His son, Andreas, also is a restorer of cathedrals and other old buildings. So after arranging with Andreas to get the permission for the use of the photographs, I had a woman on the faculty at the University of Maine translate my message, sent it over to Germany, they wrote back, had her translated back into English so I could send the permission down to the publisher so that those photographs that are in there that are of the Hartmann family could be printed. But in the process, I became aware of this other part of the family. Of course, I knew that there were Germans living and that would be interested in the story, but I had a new relationship with them, having talked with Andreas and corresponded with his father. So that's where you begin, is there someone who's in that, the next generation down to begin making those connections. Filomena has agreed to answer questions. If you have questions, she said she wouldn't give a speech, but she would answer questions. That's still true, right? Well, you have to understand she's been signing books since almost noon today, so I'm probably pretty tired.
So was I.
Yeah, but anyway, does anybody have any questions? I know a lot of you have read the story. How many of you read it already, either in the newspaper or the CD? So I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Yeah. And how many of you have had a photograph taken by Filomena?
I didn't know I was so busy.
Right.
Well, thank you.
High school.
Thank you for that in retrospect.
45 years ago, she took my wedding picture.
49 years ago, she took mine.
You haven't changed.
Anybody else want to fess up as to how long you've been married?
I can continue. I said thank you, but that didn't mean that I'm letting it go.
Yeah.
You know, you just continue. We continue to work and to share and answer questions, whatever you have. I'm still available.
She took my son's picture when he graduated from Maine Maritime Academy.
Oh, yes. Yeah, many times, yeah.
That's right.
They were a good school to photograph, yeah. I loved it.
Are there any other questions?
I have not
Sonia?
had a chance to read the book, but what time of year did this occur?
It was over a whole year.
The whole year?
Yeah, it took,
Travel?
yes, uh-huh.
Oh, they wrote the book, when we wrote the book?
No, the travel, the flight. When you
Story,
the
yeah.
boxcar and the walking.
As far as we can tell, it began in the spring of 1944, and we know that they entered American-occupied Germany as the Germans were surrendering. So that would have been May of 1945.
Yeah.
And that was another thing that, in retrospect, Filomena became aware of as she heard her mother telling the story of crossing the Elbe River. The fact that they were with soldiers and they heard them say, "I am here to surrender to the American troops." I mean, this woman is part of history. And I've told several people, there are several groups that this book contains 3 uniforms, if you notice the pictures of soldiers. The earliest ones are Russian uniforms, the German uniforms, and John Baker's United States Army uniform. So, how many people have 3 nationalities represented in their family history? Not to mention she can speak all 3 languages. And language is a theme in this book, the relevance of language. Are there any other? Yeah.
How old was she when you were traveling?
She was
On the
9
train?
when they left, and she turned 10. Yeah, you can answer that one.
Whether war was not
Yeah.
really, not really.
I don't mean to dominate, because she's got the
No,
words.
I know, I'm answering questions.
Yes, okay, yeah,
But go ahead, yeah.
yeah.
Do you have memories of being cold and hungry? Does that come back to you?
Well, I have memories, but I never was cold and hungry.
You weren't?
No.
I thought you slept in deep grass or something.
Oh, well, that's when we crossed the Elbe River. And we thought now we're safe, but then the Americans said we had to go back because because we didn't have the permission to come over. We just came over with a fisherman in a boat, with a small boat, and we didn't have any permission to come over. So we had to get back into the boat and return to where
And
the
you
Russians
did,
already came.
there was some cold in that, I think, experience, because it was raining.
It was raining.
Yeah,
It was, yeah. And the grass was up to here for me, and I was just, but I wasn't suffering. I don't ever remember being, I was cold, yeah, but my mother was always there. I was always wrong where my mother was.
And she did tell me when they walked from town to town, and they found the Burgermeister, who is like the town manager, we would, yeah,
A little louder.
that the towns would have coupons for food,
Yeah.
right? So they could get food with like ration coupons, and so I don't know that staved off the hunger, but I know that you did get some food that way, right?
Oh, yes, yeah. And then, of course, a lot of people, you have to remember that we came over with some other refugees that also came over at the same time. We were in a kind of a canoe, and we crossed the Elbe River, and then got out of the canoe and just took off. I mean, we didn't have any permissions or any tickets to cross and to enter the other part of Germany, because through the Elbe River. So then, of course, they
You knew you were safe.
They found that we came over without any permission, and they wanted us to return back, and that's where the boat got stuck overnight. And then in the morning, the fishermen came and started fishing, and they saw the boat with us in it, just a canoe really. And so we just waved them on, they came, and they brought us over where we wanted to be. And they had themselves had families, and they knew where we were at. And they wanted to help us, and they brought us back to the American section instead of back to Germany, to the German section. So we had helped them.
And the significant part of that was that the patrols of the U.S. soldiers and their chiefs were supposed to send them back, but they looked the other way and let them escape into American-occupied Germany. But it was just by chance that they sneaked through and got to where they wanted to go. The other thing that isn't in the book that Filomena shared with me after we completed it was when she, I don't know how long ago, but at some point in Bangor, she was a volunteer for the homeless shelter. And there was a time when she was one of the volunteers who was recognized at some sort of event where they were saying thank you to the volunteers. And at that point, she recognized why she was drawn to homeless people. Why?
Well, because at one time I was homeless too. Yeah, and that only came after about a year and a half that I was already involved with the homeless in Bangor. And I kept wondering why I do that. And my answer to myself was easy, because I am filled with people, with poor people and people who are homeless. But the fact that I myself was homeless at one time only came much later. All of a sudden, it came to me, oh, that's why I was feeling for the my deep feelings for the homeless people that I worked for at that time.
Sometimes recognize in retrospect why you do the things that you do, or how you are led to where you are. Another one that apparently she hadn't thought about was, I think it's so amazing that her mother took these photos and she carried them on this perilous journey. And when she recognized and anticipated that the perilous journey was going to become even more treacherous, she left them with one of their hosts in a home in Russian-occupied Germany and went back and picked them up. And I said, and so that they have these photos as a result of it. I said, well, Filomena, it's no wonder you became a photographer, right? I mean, the values were there, whether they were expressed or not. you knew implicitly that photographs were important. So, you know.
And that's true, and I didn't.
She didn't figure that out.
I didn't identify with that. I did. Come over here. She keeps going back, and I keep going back. So it would hit the wall. Come on, let's go walk.
Okay.
You know.
We'll move it.
Okay, so where was I now?
Well, it's a natural. Photography is a natural. I guess the other thing that's a natural for her to be a photographer, and as you know, you saw this tinted portrait here, that she was one of the first photographers in Maine to embrace color. And if you read the story, you remember her remembering the apple blossoms at one point when they began their long walk. And she remembered the sunset over Odessa, and the vividness of the color. And it was color and color. That's why there's one color page in this book, because it had to be color. And as you think about her career and how she led the way towards color photography in Maine anyway, to have that page with that endless row of portraits that were on display at the now late Bangor Auditorium, representing a small portion of her wonderful career, as well as the color picture of her with her trophy for one of those competitions where she was. Again, it's photography, her mother's value, but also that sense of color and the pioneering spirit she had in color photography. And somebody's looked at that picture from probably 1977 or something, said, she looks just the same today. She hasn't changed. That's what some people have kept saying. She's 79, I don't believe it. But we all know she was born on June 6, 1934. So she just celebrated her birthday. Any other questions? I don't want to keep you longer than you
When
have.
and how did you get interested in her story?
Good question. And some of you have heard this before, but she was working with a former student of mine to learn to use the computer. And I think it's just tell your story, right? That you wanted to be able to type it yourself. And her teacher, who was one of my journalism students at the University of Maine in Orono, said, I don't think you should wait to learn to use the computer to tell your story. And maybe this person would be interested in talking to you. So this student of mine gave me Filomena's number, and I think the reverse, she gave her my number, and we got together, and she'd entered a competition for Kent Burns, right? Written a story that about her experience, the beginning of this story, how she was on the boxcar and evacuated from Odessa. And this was like 2 pages handwritten, and that was what started our conversation. It was her story that she'd submitted. But, well, you tell the story. You know that one.
No. Just say it loud.
Okay. So am I speaking loud enough? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So I think that the traffic downstairs is probably. Yeah. But so anyway, that was it. We met in the bagel shop. First time, she said, you'll recognize me by my bright red hair. And I did right away. And we actually, well, I started taking notes furiously. And then we had a little hiatus. At first she said, well, I wanted to be a ghostwriter so that you could be me. And we tried that, didn't we? Tried to write, as she would write, and it just didn't work. So we stopped for a while. And then I said, well, maybe since you have this Fort Kent connection, I could do it for Echoes. So I started out with an Echoes story as, part of the Echoes theme, but it got big fast, and I realized there was much more than we had for Echoes. Then, I had just started this column in the Bangor Daily News, and my editor from Fort Kent, Rick Lavasser, agreed to pitch this story as a series in the Bangor Daily News. And I know I've told this story several times, but stop me if you've all heard it. But he said, I think I can get you a 5-part series with this story. And so I gave it to him, and he said, oh, you can send it to me online. I said, no, I think I want you to read the hard copy. with the pictures. So fortunately, and this is serendipity, just like a lot of the things in Philomena's life, is that I hand carried it down to the Bangor Daily News and put it on Rick's desk right before Thanksgiving vacation. And he said, okay, you're going to have to cut it down to a 5-part series. So I spent my Thanksgiving vacation cutting out all the episodes that didn't interfere with the chronology. So you got the story, but you lost a lot of the anecdotes. So we got on the phone, spent 3 hours on the phone, and I said, oh, Rick, I've taken this out, I've taken this out, I've taken this out, so it's going to fit. He said, oh, you can't take that out. That's really important. You can't take that out. That's really important. Oh, no, that's key. You can't take that out. So he said, I'll pitch for 2 more sections, 2 more parts to the series to my editor. Mike Dowd was the managing editor of the Bangor Daily at that time. So he pitched an increased size for the series. So he got a 7-part series. So then I had to go back and put all those pieces back into the story again. So we kept the anecdotes, like her mother running behind the train. And there were several of them, that were just unbelievable. And he was right. And I can't tell you, and this is an aside, and I'm sure it's because he's from Fort Kent, but Rick Levasseur is a terrific editor. And he knows and asks the right questions, and he launched this book, I have to say, because it was previewed in the Bangor Daily, and people responded so enthusiastically. As you may know, they held a forum for Filomena and I to talk about it after the series appeared in January of 2011. It wasn't 2 weeks after the end of the series. 70 people came and 250 went online to hear it live streamed. So, there was a calling, but I wouldn't have known that if Rick hadn't let us put it in the BDN at the beginning. So then, but that was, that was 2010, and we've been talking ever since. We finally sent it off. It's just a year since I sent it to the publisher that we finally chose. So I'm talking too much. More questions?
We can't help but see divine intervention throughout the whole thing. Things fall into place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's divine intervention.
You hear her?
And it's written all over her face. That too.
Well, that's what you said. Your mother never lost her faith.
Yeah.
That she believed that things would turn out.
Yeah.
Her quote is, "We have to adapt ourselves." I think about that in my own life now, having that things will turn out. You just accept where you are, and that's partly what got them through, along with the ingenuity and the compassion and the caring. Anything else? Well, I want to conclude just by saying thank you so much for this wonderful welcome, reunion, homecoming, all of those things, and the recognition that I'll echo what Nathan said, is that this is not a history book story. It is not history. It is a memoir. History tells you what was happening in the world and the politics and the military and national scene, but a memoir like this one tells you how war affected individuals and families. And I should say that in this research I became acquainted with an organization called the Germans from Russia Heritage Society. All of those people who are descended from those people who were transplanted from Germany into Russia during that period after the late 1800s, early 1900s. There's thousands of them, and they're all out there. I sent this story to Bismarck, North Dakota, where this is headquartered. They said, this is just one among many. So she's a microcosm, and this little book is a microcosm for hundreds, probably thousands of people who were part of that migration. So I feel like I'm touching history here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. She was my support.